Hi, everybody. Welcome to In the Chill of the Night, episode 17. Got a great show for you here tonight. I'm George Belsky. I'm joined by Ray Gadetti, and our guest tonight is a good friend of mine. We worked together for a number of years in Savannah. Uh, Retired ATF Special Agent Lou Valoze. LJV, how are you, brother?
Doing great, man. It's an honor to be here. Thanks to both of you guys.
It's
Hey
our
Lou,
pleasure.
Lou, thanks for coming on, Lou. Really appreciate it. Heard so much
Hey,
about you.
thank you, brother. Great to be
So
here.
I'm going to give a little bit of an intro, Lou, and then I'm going to hand it off to you. But Lou spent 26 years in federal law enforcement. He started with the old INS in Los Angeles, went over to the Marshal Service for a brief stint, and then found a home, just like I did, in ATF. Spent the majority of his career in Savannah, the Savannah field office, uh, developed a reputation and a resume that uh, really put him in the forefront of ATF undercover operations. And so tonight we're gonna go a stroll down memory lane. Uh, I was fortunate enough, or unfortunate enough, as the case may be, depending on where you're sitting, to have been Lou's supervisor. But despite that fact, we're still good friends. Um, Lou, welcome again, and uh, let's start not quite at the beginning, but I will say that we share some common background. Your dad, God rest his soul, was a sheet metal worker, as was my dad.
That's
You're
right.
from just north of the city. I'm from just south in New Jersey. Couple of blue collar kids that found their way into federal law enforcement. So pick it up from where'd you go to school, and how did you wind up in law enforcement?
So I was one of those directionless people, young guys in college. I went to Lafayette College in Pennsylvania,
Go
and
Pards.
go Pards, yeah, on a football scholarship. And to say that I didn't take my student career seriously would be an understatement. Barely made it out with a 2.2 grade point average, and with a
Wow.
degree in economics and business, and I didn't know much about either subject when I got out. So I took a job at a bank, making $8 or $9 an hour, miserable, working in a room with no windows, reading computer printouts and sorting them in different boxes. And one day I got a call from a guy who I had played ball with, and he was in the Bronx, and he said, "Hey man, I'm at my brother's place. Why don't you come over after work and hang out?" So I drove down there, and his brother pulls up. I had never met his brother before, and there's this. He's driving a Corvette, and he gets out, and he's a long-haired guy, Italian guy. Kind of got the Miami Vice get up on, because that was this was 35 years ago, and he worked for the DEA, and he was an undercover guy. And we talked for about over a beer for about a half hour, 45 minutes. And man, I was hooked. I finally had direction in my life. I knew what I wanted
Wow.
to do. Yeah, that
I,
is
I know I
yeah,
know the story, right? Boom.
yeah,
It wasn't
yeah.
work anymore. Yeah.
That's right. I knew that I at least had a goal now. I had a purpose. And man, I just started taking the tests. You guys remember there was the TEA, the Treasury test, and all the different tests. And the one good thing was I was still in test taking mode because I was so fresh out of college. And I scored really high and ended up getting a phone call from INS in Los Angeles for a special agent position for an interview. I didn't even own a suit. So, my dad took me down to the garment district, and we bought a suit from like Chinese Charlie's, and I tucked my mullet in my collar and flew out to LA, and went through the interview. And I, again, because I didn't know what I was doing, or I wasn't nervous because I was clueless, and I did very well in the interview. And the next week I got a call and a job offer. And I found myself down at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center a few months later as an INS special agent.
And go through FLETC, as it's called down here. Did you do language? Because you got picked up by INS. Did you do a language course down here, or once you got into your first assignment?
No, I had to do the Spanish immersion course at FLETC. And when I got there, George, I had never even held a gun in my life, right? Never held a gun. I mean, you talk about green. I knew nothing. And immigration law is convoluted and it's complicated. But I found it fascinating. I actually enjoyed it. I would say behind like tax law, maybe the IRS agents, immigration law is the most complicated law we have in this country. But I loved it. I loved learning about it. And I got out in the streets of LA. We got to LA, and the first thing they do is they put you after the Spanish immersion, you get out there and they put you at the LA County Jail Central, and you're working the release line, interviewing every foreign-born inmate on the release line to determine alienage and deportability. So, I was interviewing MS-13 guys, and this was 91. Nobody knew what MS-13 was yet. And all these gangbangers, and most of the interviews were in Spanish. And I was just introduced to a world I knew nothing about. The West Coast, these gangs, I mean, they were way ahead of anyone anywhere else in the world. These guys were coming into LA, and they were showing a level of violence that even the Bloods and the Crips, these guys weren't accustomed to. What these guys were doing, and I was thrown right into that, and I loved it. I was on the streets. I worked the riots. We were doing human trafficking. The anti-smuggling unit, gang unit, just street work, and I fell in love with it. Deep down, I knew I wanted to work undercover. Obviously, you got to pay your dues before that happens, and a big Italian guy doesn't have a whole lot of opportunities for undercover work with immigration. So, but I learned how to be a cop. I was lucky enough to get on a task force, the Rampart Task Force, with LAPD, ATF, and INS. And that's where I learned how to be a cop. We were doing shift work. We answered to the LAPD sergeant, and we were just hitting the streets, just corner jump outs, just total, saturation. The Rampart district, if you're not familiar with it, in Los Angeles it was hot, man. It was just crime ridden. It was a great place to be a cop. LA in the early 90s was one of the best places in the world to be a cop at that time. But I saw then, when I started working with the ATF guys, that's where I wanted to go. They were always in the mix. They were the ones who the real cops had respect for. They were the ones doing all the undercover work. They were the cowboys. And so I knew, I had to work my way over to that agency eventually.
Yeah. And how long were you with INS?
So I was with INS for 5 years out there in LA. And then I got on to get back to the East Coast, I transferred to the Marshals, and I was on the fugitive squad with the Marshals in New York and Puerto Rico. And while I was in Puerto Rico, ATF finally came open with a class, and I got hired, and I came on with ATF and started working in the beginning of 1998.
Okay.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
So back to FLETC for your third time, because
So
you went INS, Marshals, and then with ATF.
So I have done well over a year of my life as a basic student at FLETC. That's correct.
It's almost like a sentence.
Yeah. But I kept getting better at it as I went along.
Nice.
I was
good.
Now, did it get any easier?
It was hard because when I was already like a 12-step, I don't know, 10 or something when I switched over to ATF. But I didn't have to do the CI portion again, obviously, and everyone else in my class with ATF, it was only an opening for 1811s for people who were already agents in other agencies. So it was Secret Service guys and Marshals and everyone else. so at least, my classmates were peers, so even though we were still technically basic students, it wasn't as bad. Sometimes it's just hard to be at FLETC because it's a terrible place.
Hey,
Yeah,
I worked there.
I
Stop it.
know.
Yeah.
I'm
Um,
sorry.
and in your basic class was a postal inspector friend of mine. Now we're mutual friends. And I remember getting a phone call from him that said, "Hey, I'm leaving the postal inspectors, and I got hired by ATF." And I, number one, was very glad that he did it. Uh, but I was also mad at him that he didn't tell me he was putting in, because I would have jumped on that same ship. Uh, because I had been a street cop before going to the postal inspectors. And although that's a fantastic organization that does some incredible work, I kind of wanted to go back to that street level law enforcement that ATF did. So about a year later, I made the same switch that Lou did. Um, but so let's get back to Lou's story. So you finish up FLETC and you head up to the Savannah field office.
Mhm.
And how was that?
Well, I'll tell you what, just to rewind, when I got hired, there was, I think I had maybe 2 months before the academy date. And when my first day in Savannah, I had this partner who's a mentally disturbed guy. Um, his initials are Randy Beach, Randall J. Beach. And I was working undercover. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. He was an undercover. I was working undercover my second day on the job.
No way.
Yep.
Are you
I was
kidding?
buying a gun in the restroom of a Crystal Burger, a fast food restaurant. Um,
Now, were you voluntold to do this, or raise your hand on second?
no, man, I told Randy the second I met him, I wanted to work undercover, man. That's what I was there for,
Wow.
and he threw me right in. And he had some great informants already, and I probably did, I don't know, 10 or 12 undercover deals before I went to the academy. And then, Randy
Wow.
had to go to court for me because I had court while I was in the academy. Uh, but that's so I just lucked out that I got partnered up with an undercover guy, uh, and he was wanting a partner. So it couldn't have worked out better. So when I got out of the academy, I just jumped in, and I started small, the way you're supposed to start. An informant would introduce me to some gang member who was a convicted felon and was selling a gun or selling a small amount of dope. And I just started out with nickel and dime dope and gun buys, and I did hundreds and
Wow.
hundreds of them. And
Great.
I knew, I found a home, and that's where I wanted to be. But I also knew that I wanted to be on that national level. I wanted to be on that national stage with the guys who I ended up becoming very good friends with and working with. But at the time, those were the guys that I wanted to be. Chris Bayless, Jay Dobbins, those guys were out there doing it, and I wanted to work my way up, to doing, long term deep infiltrations and big cases as an undercover.
Lou, let's take a second for the folks that aren't familiar with uh, undercover as an enforcement or an investigative technique. And I you alluded to it in that last segment there, but there's like two kinds of undercover. There's that street level undercover where you're just buying quick hits. You're going out and buying a couple guns, you're buying a little bit of dope, you're buying maybe some high explosives. um, and then you take it up to that next level and you do those extended long terms. Uh, so what was your initial exposure to that? How did you? Because I know Randy not as well as you, but I know him, and I know he was always at that level of he was always doing the aggressive stuff, but he didn't do long term stuff. He was just an undercover working in the field, right?
Yeah, Randy was a cop.
Yeah,
You
he
know,
was a cop's cop.
to his credit, he was a cop, man.
Yeah.
So I I had kind of two initials. I started getting a good reputation, mostly, through Randy. And I was just doing everything I could. And initially, I want to say it was probably 1999. I got a call from Atlanta to see if I wanted to do an undercover biker case, right? The Outlaws motorcycle gang. And the reason I got that call, it was not because I was equipped in any way to go undercover as an outlaw biker. I knew nothing about that culture, about outlaw bikers. I was the only other person in the Atlanta Field Division who had a motorcycle license on his undercover license. Because when you get an undercover license, whatever classifications you have on your real license transfer over. And
Right.
when I was like 18 years old in New York, I had a Yamaha Virago, so I had gotten my motorcycle license, so I still had it. And when I say I knew nothing, when I was on my way up to Atlanta for the first meet, I was calling a buddy of mine in New York and saying, "Hey, is it like 1 down and 4 up on a Harley?" I mean, that's how green I was. And so what had happened was my partner Brian Neal, he was already, man, they had already made a great case, and they were undercover with the Outlaws in Atlanta, and he was working with a task force officer from up that way. And as soon as they got invited to go, the Outlaws invited them to go with them to the Daytona to Bike Week. This guy's the task force guys. He was with the local sheriff's department. They were like, "Hey, man, listen, we didn't really sign up for all this," and they pulled him out. And Brian, he needed a partner, man. So because of my motorcycle license, I got the call, and I'll tell you what I did though. And the first thing I did when I got up there, and there was two like powerhouse informants in with us. So I got there. It was in North Georgia mountains. It was kind of raining, misting. It was nighttime. They gave me this huge dresser, right? This huge, like 1,000-pound, dresser Harley with all the fairings and all that. And I hadn't ridden a motorcycle since my Virago, 5 years ago, whenever they were. And they take off like bats out of hell in the North Georgia mountains, winding and curving. And I dumped it. I tried to keep up with them, and I dumped it, man. And I mean, I tore myself up. The bike, and they had just redone it. It was a bike that had been seized, and they had redone it. So, and these informants show up. I'm in a ditch, and the throttle was stuck, and the wheel's still going, and I'm all messed up in a ditch. And the informants look at Brian. They're like, "We're going to take this guy into the outlaw." Right? So at least, we got the bike up, and it was all bent and mangled, but we're able to kind of turn some things to get it going. And I said, "Listen," they were like, Brian was like, "I'm going to call, I'm going to call an ambulance." I said, "No, listen, I'm good." And I got back on that bike, which was all messed up, and I rode with them. And at least they respected that. They didn't respect my capabilities, but they respected that. So what I did during that case, when they first brought me into a clubhouse, and I had never been in a outlaw biker clubhouse, and I can tell you, it's intimidating, when you walk in, and I was young, man. God, I was I don't know, 23, 24 years old, and just not knowing anything about it. But here's what I did when they brought me in, and there's these apes, right? These guys were animals, man. They were all just big dudes and dirty and smelly. And I went right up to the president. The president, his name was Pierre at the time. None of them used real names. And I said, "Listen, man," I said, I introduced myself, and I said, I don't know your culture. I don't know your rules. And I certainly don't want to offend any of you guys by doing or saying something I shouldn't. I said, I just want to learn, man. I want to be one of you guys, and I want you to teach me. That was my approach. And let me tell you, I just played it right to his ego. And, so he saw this big, young, dumb guy, and someone he could mold, right? Someone who could be useful to him. And he took me in. And, that's how I played that case, because if I had gone in there and tried to act like an outlaw biker, they would have seen right through that. Right. So that's when I learned. I learned a lot during that case, about being an undercover, and just don't go in there. Don't try to change yourself, and don't go in there trying to be someone you're not. If you don't know about, their hustle, ask them, right? Just be normal. And, that's kind of how I played my whole undercover career like that.
So you're moving up the ranks of the undercover uh, groups, and ATF has a enhanced undercover program. They'll send agents out to advanced schooling with uh, very qualified undercovers that teach them about different techniques and all those sorts of things. Um, and you're on your way into that ballpark. Um, it's kind of like going from minor league ball into the big leagues. Um, what what brought you? Well, let's go. I know you did a job in Arizona with Jay, um, in his big case. What did you learn from that?
That was my real introduction on that national scene I was talking about. Shortly after the outlaw case, I got the call. I got a call from Jay Dobbins, author of No Angel, great book,
Mm-hmm.
and Chris Bayless, who became just kind of my mentor in life and undercover. And Jay had made this incredible case out there on the border in Arizona with this crew. It was just one of these crews, man, that were into everything: guns,
They were
drugs.
outlaws also.
No, this was a home invasion crew, man.
Oh,
These were
really?
just gangsters, a big home invasion crew. And so what he wanted to do was, he had already done the hard work, but for the finale of the case, he wanted to fly out three guys who, he told these guys, listen, I'm bringing my own crew for this home invasion. It was going to be a big deal. So he wanted to fly us out, three guys, John Babyface Carr out of LA, Chris Bayless out of Chicago, and he had called me. And the bad guys actually, he wanted to fly us out for the last 2 weeks of the case to wrap it up and do this home invasion scenario. So he actually had the bad guys pick us up at the airport. So when I flew into Tucson, the bad guys so we were in roll like as we stepped off the airplane, and they picked me up, and we did a couple weeks out there with these guys we bought RPGs from these guys. I mean, like I said, there was nothing they were not into. We were buying kilos, all sorts of guns, RPGs, and all the while setting up this huge home invasion that we were going to do. And I mean, here I am working with these guys that I had always heard about. I had met John Carr back in LA, Babyface.
How cool is that?
Yeah, I mean, these guys were guys who, I wanted to, become just like them. Now I was working with them hand in hand, and so, it was really cool. We set up the home invasion with them. I almost messed everything up at the end.
How's that?
So Jay decided he wanted to throw bone to the SRT guys, to our SWAT guys, because those guys spend hours and hours, like up in a tree somewhere or something, always, to cover us. So he arranged it so that the last meet before the home invasion was going to be, when we're going to shore everything up, was going to be at a strip joint. So the SRT guys were able to dress down and go into the strip joint as customers, which was a nice treat for them. And so kind of to be a funny guy, and this was back, we were still using the Nagra back then. I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah.
Yes.
Reel to reel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jay instructed me to put the recorder and transmitter, and the only place to put it, and we were in Arizona, right? I was wearing a cut off t-shirt and jeans, was to put it, in my crotch. So this big Nagra and the transmitter and all that, so again, not exactly comfortable, right? And then we get in there and we're with the bad guys, and Jay decides to send a stripper over to me to give me a lap dance, right? Again, making me a little more uncomfortable, right? Because I got all this
Just a little.
equipment and now, right.
Yep.
So I thought it would be funny, like a funny kind of retort. About halfway through the song, I told the stripper, I said, listen, I don't know what he gave you. I said, but here's $20. I said, go finish the song with him. I said, but he's kind of kinky. I said, halfway through your dance, I said, give him a little pop, give him a little slap in the face. He likes that kind of thing, right? So she bounces over there with my 20 and starts dancing for him. And I swear to God, first of all, I didn't notice she was wearing all these rings on her hand. Out of nowhere, she comes up with a closed fist, like a Mike Tyson left hook, right to Bird's cheeks, right here, the side of the face. And if you know Jay's got high cheekbones. He never could have been a
Yeah.
boxer. And man, she busted him wide open. I mean, wide open.
Wow.
And he ended up in the bathroom getting sutured by the medic from the SWAT team in the bathroom of the strip joint.
Does he
And
know that you put her up to it?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, I'm done, right? I will never get an invite again, right? I just fucked up my whole career. And he ended up, and I have pictures. I don't think I put in a book, but he ended up with a huge shiner and a big busted cheek.
Wow.
He had to explain that to his wife that he had gotten that at a strip joint. And so he was pissed, but he got over it. It actually kind of played into the whole thing. And, we did the takedown. The takedown was one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. Like helicopter came up behind the sand dune and these guys all ran and they were getting beanbagged by the SRT guys. Just a really cool case. Jay did cool out and thanks to Chris Bayless and I did get further invites after that. And we got through that, but that was really on the national stage, my first gig, but I did good in the important part, the undercover part, I did good. And from that point on, I just ended up bouncing all over the country, working with just the greatest men and women, in my opinion, in undercover in the world. And, that kind of set it off at that point, and there was no looking back.
Go ahead, Ray.
So Lou, I mean, and George, I apologize if you got a question, throw it in there, but I think this is a great time to bring up your book that you recently published, right? There you go. Storefront Sting, an ATF agent's life undercover. And George, you got a signed copy too, right?
I did.
So, can you give us a little bit about the book and what's in it? What can people expect? Sounds like it's going to be stories like this, and it's not just one case. There's a whole bunch of things in there, right?
Yeah. So, Ray, the book is about 4 of these undercover storefront operations that I conducted in Georgia, in different cities in Georgia. That's what the book is about. I kind of start the story the same way I did with you guys, just to explain briefly how I got into it. But that's what the book, 90% of the book is about. These operations that I kind of fell into the first one, but after doing a couple of the biker operations and some murder for hires and some gang infiltrations, I kind of started to see how you can, man, there were guys you would put in 2-3 years on a case and maybe you'd lock up, you get 15 to 20, patch members of a club or
Right.
Of a gang or whatever, and, if you're lucky, you'd get some dope and you'd get maybe 30 guns. So I get the call to do this storefront operation, which was a tattoo shop. And, we can go into these if you want to, but I'll just tell you, I did the first one. And in a 12-month period, we bought 430 crime guns off the streets of Augusta, Georgia, from gangbangers.
Oh, wow.
And, I said, man, you talk about bang for the buck. I just did a 12-month operation and got 430 crime guns. ATF had never seen results like these.
Wow.
They were unheard of. So, we ended up doing 3 more after that, and with each one, it got better. We evolved. It was an evolution. They got more complicated. We went from street gang members at the beginning, which we never really got away from, but we at the end we were into organized crime. We were into Bolivian gun traffickers. We really got into organizations. We just stepped our game up with each one. And the book centers around the evolution of these storefront operations and just the incredible success that we had with these and a lot of the failures that we had. A lot of we made mistakes.
Can can
And
can you talk about any of those?
absolutely. I mean, I talk about them in the
Yeah.
book.
Yep.
Before you do
Sure.
that, I just want to interject that the whole time Lou was in the enhanced undercover program and getting these calls to go out and do stuff, he was still pulling a caseload in Savannah. He was still making firearms trafficking cases. So he had trips up and down the I-95 corridor with Georgia as a source state, um, going up to New York and New Jersey, which were market states. So it's not like the only thing he did was undercover. He was, in addition to being a great undercover, he was a great case agent. He did the journeyman level case stuff. It's not like he was removed and just doing prima donna stuff. Now he won't tell anybody that, but I came to the Savannah office as a supervisor after their first two storefronts, Augusta Inc. and then Statesboro Blues, and so I got to see firsthand, uh, you know, the creativity, the ingenuity, the hard work that he did, and I'll tell you, probably one of uh, the major mistakes that I made as a boss was I allowed him to be both the case agent and the lead undercover, which you shouldn't do. And when he and I taught this for ATF, and he's taught it since then, but one of the things we always say is, hey, you got to divvy up the work because it was too big of a load for him. Although he would never admit it, I think we can say that that's true. So before he gets into this, I just want you to know he was not a prima donna. He
Wow.
was a working case agent, and was humping a pretty good sized ruck, doing cases both using regular investigative techniques as well as undercover.
Wow.
Well, I'll tell you what. Like Ray. Here's an insight into the undercover world, and I saw this early on, and I'm not putting anyone down or judging anyone. It's just what I saw and I observed. There was a lot of guys who they were the undercover guys, right? That's what they did, and they put their feet up on the desk, and they said, "Hey, man, call me when it's time to do the undercover work." And they would go in, they would do a great job, they do the
Right.
undercover, and when it was done, they rode away. They rode away on their Harley or their horse into the sunset, right? And that was, I looked at some of the guys. Now I looked at Jay Dobbins, I looked at Chris Bayless, and I was like, wow, these guys, they're running their cases, right? They're running their cases and they're
Wow.
doing the undercover work. Like they and I always prided myself that I was not a one trick pony, man. I did everything.
Yep.
And plus maybe part of that is being a little bit of a control freak as well, because
Just a little,
yeah,
just a little bit.
I knew what worked and I wanted to do it my way, because I knew what got results and what worked. So, I had to have my hands on everything. And George is absolutely right. It's not the way to do it. It's just not. You have to have a case agent and you have to separate yourself as the undercover, and just there's plenty to do just as the undercover in a long-term infiltration. But I guess I was somewhat of a control freak, and I wanted to control it, do everything because, I felt I knew best what move to make next and all that. So probably, yeah, that is one of the big mistakes looking back on my career, for sure.
God bless you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, if you, and I'll tell you, I talk about in the book, and I'm being very specific to the storefront operations. We hired people to give ourselves a little more credibility, especially at the beginning if it was a slow start. We hired people from the community to work at these stores. The one we did in Statesboro was a huge mistake, man. We got a guy who was a multi-convicted felon. I had bought a large amount of crack cocaine from him, and this is when those federal crack statutes were still just brutal. Yeah. And he was a nice guy. I mean, he was a good, pleasant guy to deal with. And his girlfriend came up to us afterward, and she said, "Hey, his name, Petey was what everyone called him. Petey needs, as a condition of his parole, he has to be employed. Could you guys hire him here at the store? You guys seem to like him. It's all good. he knows what's going on here." So we were like, wow, what an opportunity, right? Instant street cred with the people from this city, right? They all knew him and they knew what he was about.
Wow.
So we hired him kind of on a conditional basis. And he ended up working that store every day for 8 months with us, which presented, some issues, right? This is a long-term undercover operation. And he's at the counter, he's working the register, and right behind the wall right here there's a room next door with a cover team, guys running criminal histories and running license plates and with long guns ready to come in the event of a robbery. And so it added even more work to us to keep, we could never come out of roll. Obviously he was there all the time. But it paid off, man. He became part of the operation, a trusted part of the operation.
Right.
And, as we he ended up like brokering deals for us and helping negotiate on prices. And he thwarted 2 robberies when the same guys we were dealing with during the day, who had already been in and sold us guns and sold us drugs, and we had done, 5 or 6 deals with. Those were the same guys who were coming back at night to rob us with ski masks on. And
incredible.
Yeah, on 2 occasions he jumped in the middle. He jumped in between. He knew who they were. And he was like, "Man, you don't want to, we're all going for our guns, thinking, oh, this operation's over. We're about to have a shootout." And he put himself in the middle and talked them down, got them out. And so by the time the operation was about to shut down, me and the other guys, the undercover guys, we had become attached to this guy. He would have jumped in front of a bullet for us. And we were like, wow, Petey's going to prison, man, for a long time. And we just felt terrible about it. And, they decided to arrest him before. It was a massive takedown. Decided to arrest him first and put him in the lockup. And, he tried to kill himself. He tried to commit suicide. He strung up his bed sheets unsuccessfully, luckily. And then, we didn't think all these guys, now you got all these defendants coming in and they're just finding out who we are and that this was an undercover operation, right? These might be guys we hadn't dealt with in 6 months. We bought guns from, but we had shut them off. And, now they're getting arrested and brought in. They're finding out we're undercover. Now they see Petey. They see the guy who's been behind the counter with us. So we hadn't thought about it, but what are they going to think? He's not going to be popular in the lockup, right? He's a snitch. And so, and then he had to be separated. And, it was just terrible, man. We all felt terrible. I even went to court to try and get him a downward departure and got up on the stand, and the federal judge didn't want to hear it. He looked at me and said, "Listen, man, this defendant wasn't helping you because you're a law enforcement officer. He was helping you because he thought you were a gangster just like he is. 20 years. Yeah. Man. And then what did we do? We went and we hired locals for the next one. Just like I said, mistakes were made, without a doubt. But, I would also say, show me any long-term, not even undercover, any law enforcement operation that goes on, for a year that you couldn't Monday morning quarterback and pick apart and say, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that?
Of course.
The gray area, any law enforcement operation, there's gray areas everywhere.
Well, there's no cookie cutter solution. I mean,
Right.
you're dealing with people and humans. It doesn't work that way.
That's right.
Now,
So
what was life like for you? I mean, where you're sleeping at night. What does that look like? What's the downtime? There is none, right?
You know, I was Ray. I was nonstop, and George can tell you, I couldn't stop. I mean, I was addicted. It was my drug. Um, After the I can't even remember which operation it was. I believe it was a second storefront. As we were coming close to shutting it down, I was out to dinner with my wife, and we had just had little babies, just kids, and I was telling her, listen, I'm going to take some time off. Spend some time. I'm going to shut this down. During that conversation, my phone rings, and it's Chris Bayless, the Chicago guy I told you about. And he said, listen, man, he goes, I want to try something. I need you to come up here. It's probably never going to work. We got this guy we're trying to get in on. It's a joint case with ATF and FBI. FBI has sent three informants at this guy, and he sniffed them all out. And two of them were childhood friends. They were dirty cops. He goes, I want to try sending you in cold. I have an idea. And literally, as I'm telling my wife I'm about to take some time off in between, because I've already got the other storefront like lined up, but I couldn't say no to him. Never. There was no way. So, I told my wife, listen, I'm going to go up there. He said, it's never going to work. It'll be a couple of days. That'll be it. And I went up there, and his idea, this guy he was in the mafia. They call it the outfit in Chicago. He was also a patched member of the Outlaws, Chicago. And, this was right when they were at war with the Angels up there and all that. And it was a big deal because it was the first like really recorded case of the mafia and the outlaws.
Yeah, I was going
Outlaw
to say
bikers,
you don't hear about that,
working
right?
together, right? The mafia was using these guys to do a lot of their dirty work. And this guy had a jewelry store up there in Cicero, that's where Al Capone's headquarters were. And
Al
it
Capone.
was a total front. I mean, it was a front. In the back of that place, there was about 3 or 4 layers to get in. And then in the back, he was doing deals with the mafia, outlaw bikers, the Latin Kings. I mean, Chicago street gangs, you name it. Gangster disciples. And so he sent me to this guy because he did have a sign that said "We buy gold." I mean, it was a total front. It was kind of his own storefront. And he sent me there with a Crown Royal bag full of bloody crowns with teeth still in them that he had gotten from his dentist. And I was to go in there cold, see if this guy would buy them from me. And that's how it started. And it took me months. He took a liking to me. My cover for that was I was a kind of a down and out MMA fighter who was up there as a punching bag, basically, for a local gym up there. And it took me a long time. That was the hardest case I've ever done. The hardest because this guy was so smart. He wasn't even a felon. They could not get this guy on anything. They were working a bombing he had done. They were putting the video gambling machines in people's businesses, and you really didn't have a choice when they told you. And they had ended up blowing. One guy said he didn't want him, and they blew his place up, sent him a message. So it took me months and months, but I was able to work my way into this guy. And I did that as one storefront was shutting down. And then I found myself in Chicago, still working cases back in Savannah, and then starting up the next storefront. And that Chicago case went for the period of a year. So that's what my life was like, Ray. I mean, I was in hotels.
So much for you telling your wife you'll be right back.
Right.
And then because that Chicago case, if I remember right, Lou, was in between Augusta and Statesboro, and because the night that I go up to Statesboro before we did the big takedown on that case, the word had already gotten out that I was going up to Savannah to be the boss, and Lou and I and a Glenn County detective are sitting around having dinner, and we haven't even arrested the guys in the current storefront nor prosecuted them. And Lou is telling me, hey, I got an idea for the next one. And we knew where we were going to put it. And I said, well,
Oh, boy.
don't we need to put this other case to bed first? Because I'm a brand new supervisor. He goes, nah, we can do it. I can do it. And, you know, eager to be a boss that always said yes and never said no, man, we start going. We start going off to the races. And then that job ended and we set up another one. And that was the pace. And there was 2 weeks that stand out in my mind that these guys were living in an undercover house together. We were rotating probably 3, 4, 5 guys, agents out of the undercover house that we were living in, and these guys were just at each other's throats. And I said, "That's it. 2 weeks. Shut this thing down. Everybody goes home. Spend time with your family. Catch up on some paperwork, whatever it is, but." Don't answer the phone. Just we'll come up with something. And
And
they did it. They
I
argued
couldn't
about
believe
it.
you did that to me. Yeah.
What? Yeah, they were arguing the whole time, and I could see that these guys who were friends are now fighting with each other. And it's like, guys, this isn't worth it. And I send them home, and they hated it. But I tell you, in hindsight, being 2020, I should have done it more. I should have made these guys go home. You know, they're Lou, and correct me if I'm wrong, but these guys are addicted to the chase. They're addicted to the work. They love doing it. They I don't want to say they needed it, but it was the challenge. It was the way to go. And and as a boss, as a supervisor of these guys, I'm addicted to letting them run. And so we did. We were literally going 100 miles an hour probably for the 3 years that I was in that office. Lou, is that correct or
You know, without a doubt. You know, and Ray, I'll tell you what. I'll just describe. This was the atmosphere back then, like with all the guys, you know, who were working undercover back then around the country. You would hear, like I would hear, oh man, Jay Dobbins just made this case, right? And he got 40 defendants and this many guns and this many kilos of dope. And so I would have kind of two feelings from that, right? First feeling was pride, right? This was one of my guys on my team. And man, that's awesome. And I'm proud. And then the other feeling that went along with that was, oh, I could do better than that. Right? I can outdo that. And we had that, right? All of us, man, we had that.
Yep.
I can't call it a healthy competition because there wasn't nothing healthy about it, but it was a competition. You know, you
Unspoken.
would hear, yeah, you know, and all of us deep down thought, oh man, I can do better than that, right? Of course. And then you would go out and you would try to outdo, you know, what the last guy did. And I tell you what, results, right? I mean, great results. Bad guys were getting locked up. Violent offenders were getting locked up. Crime guns were getting taken off the street. Kilos of drugs were getting taken off the street. You know, but there's a price to pay, right? There was definitely a personal price to pay for that. And but that was the atmosphere back then, right? You know, when you heard about a case another office did, man, you were happy. That was your team, and you were proud, but you wanted to do better than they did.
I hope that's still present in today's law enforcement.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, undercover work is, as I said before, or at least I said it during our little green room chat, is to me very dangerous, very challenging, and it takes a certain type of individual to be able to do it and be successful at it, as you're describing here. And you know, in the best of times in law enforcement, it's difficult to get great undercover officers, and I wonder what it's like today, where things are a bit challenging.
Yeah, you know, there's I mean, from the guys, the very few that I know that are still working, almost everyone I know has left in one way or another. But it's just not like it was, and I don't know if it will ever return to that. We had an incredible run, we really did.
But you also described before. I mean, when you were talking about the stats of what you're seizing and the people that are getting arrested off of one case, you don't see that. And George,
No,
you would agree with me on that too, right? I
Oh,
mean, it's
the
incredible, pound for pound. It's effective. It's efficient. It's got all the markings of precision policing.
and um, and again, one of the things that I tried to do was um, not just use the technique because it was a cool technique. So when we tried to do these, there was a method to it. It wasn't just, hey, let's do a storefront because storefronts are cool. We knew a plan. We had an operational plan that would talk about why we're doing it, how we're doing it. But the thing that made it worthwhile, I think, was you're doing it on your own turf. You're not going to meet the bad guy in a parking lot or at his house or in some clubhouse or in some bar. You're in the place and you control it. You've got the best evidence because it's wired and it's filming and there's a cover team, you know, feet away as opposed to around the block getting delayed by a train. And so you controlled as much as you could control. So it, from a safety standpoint for the agents, it was certainly safer. And for the bad guys, it was certainly safer. Um, and Lou, what were our numbers? Um, for I was there for the storefronts that you did. Uh, what do you think the numbers were combined on those? Any idea? Have you done the math?
I do. Yeah, drugs. We bought as much drugs as we had money in the cash box for. Right.
Yeah,
I mean, that was our goal was to buy guns. So the first one, Thunderbolt surplus, 245 guns in 9 months,
Wow.
and that is not in a big city either.
nope, yep,
Yeah, and the second one, Operation Pulaski, was 240 guns, and that was. But we can I know all the stats in these. The incredible stat from Operation Pulaski, beside the number of guns, is the average sentence was almost 10 years. The average sentence for the defendants was almost 10 years, and that's Fed time. So they're doing
Wow.
it.
Yep.
We, like George was saying, we didn't just throw one of these down somewhere. Just, first of all, we were requested by, the chief of police, right? We were requested by whoever the sheriff was. We were getting a request to do an operation. And then we compiled statistics, right? Which our agency, luckily, statistics on guns, on gun crimes. We would actually compile statistics on all the guns that were seized in that city and where they came from, and in the numbers and the crimes. Guns seized in other cities that came from that city. So we would get all the stats on all the gun crimes, gun related crimes, and we would put all those together and we would say, listen, okay, there's obviously a gun crime problem here. And this is the investigative tool we're going to use to address it.
Wow.
So it wasn't just haphazard that we would start up a storefront, somewhere in some city, man. It was all driven by the numbers, and we were specifically addressing violent crime in these cities. And man, it worked. Results. And I'll tell you really quick, probably one of the greatest things that a fellow law enforcement officer has ever said to me in my career that meant the most, was after the storefront we had done in Statesboro, Georgia. I talked to one of the detectives who was in the cover room the whole time, he had moved up. He was almost, I think, a major, maybe like 2 years later. And he called me and he said, I got to tell you, he goes, like our narc guys, they have nothing to do. He said, there is no drug
Wow.
dealing, gun dealing going on in this city. He said, all the dope boys are afraid that everyone's working for the feds. He said, 2 years later, our crime rate is rock bottom. And now, to me, that's impact, right?
That's impact. Yep.
That's impact.
Wow.
And
Hey,
that was validation for me that we're doing the right thing.
so I know in the book you cover a murder for hire case, and just skimming through some of the summary of that, there was I guess it was a doctor that already had two murders under his belt for his uh, former wives. Could you tell us about that case and uh, some of the background on that and what was that like?
Yeah, I highlighted that one because it was very different, and I just I very briefly go into it. I think it's only a couple pages,
Hmm.
and I am actually writing my second book about it. I'm going to go into detail about it. So my
Wow.
second book I'm doing with three other agents. One of them is Jay Dobbins,
Yep.
another one is Chris Bayless, and Tino Brancato, and we have all done murder for hires, and we chose these different ones that aren't your typical. ATF, we do a lot of murder for hires, but it's usually some gangster who's probably already locked up, who wants maybe a witness killed in his case, or even a prosecutor or a judge. Um, and they're very typical. These gang members, organized crime members, gangsters who want someone involved in their case killed. Um, but the ones we picked, and this one I'll tell you about with the doctor, these are different ones where the intended victim, wasn't some witness or some law enforcement officer or judge, or uh, it was a lover, a husband, a wife, an ex-wife, an ex-lover. There's emotions involved. So, not to try and sound smart, but I would dare say the psychological profile of these defendants, of these murder for hire solicitors, is very different from the usual defendant we're working
Right.
on as ATF agents. So this particular case is totally bizarre because there was a guy who was a firearms instructor down at our academy who was living on the premises of this doctor, a wealthy guy. And the doctor had approached him on several occasions. This guy kind of had a military background, this firearms instructor, and the doctor had said, "Man, asked him if he knew anyone who he could hire to have his wife killed." And this guy kind of
That's
had just brushed it off a few times, like, come on. And then finally, he's like, "Man, this guy is serious." So this guy who was vilified during the trial, but he did exactly what he was supposed to do. Now, he knew ATF, he knew us as agents, that was one of our things, murder for hires. He went to the closest office, right? He was at the academy. Savannah was the closest field office. And he just went up there and talked to the supervisor. He asked to see the supervisor and explain the situation. Supervisor at the time called me in, and I listened to him, and I said, "Okay, if he approaches you again," I said, "don't approach him about it, but if he approaches you again, give him this number. This is my undercover cell phone. Tell him my name is Sal. Tell him you think you got a guy who might be interested, who does this sort of thing." And he left. And George can tell you, like, these things do come up more often than you think. And 9 times out of 10, that's it. You don't ever hear anything. So a week or two later, I was in the grocery store with my wife, and my undercover phone rings, and it's a number I don't recognize, a 912 area code number. And I answer it, and he goes, "Hey, this is the doc." And I'm like, "Shit." I go, "Let me get somewhere I can talk." I said, "Call me back in about 20 minutes. So I hang up, and then I tell my wife, I said, "I got to get back to the house and set up all my recording equipment," right? This is before days where I could just record on my phone. So I had to go back and set up the little NT2 and put the earpiece in and all that. And he called back, and we set up a meeting. And I met him at a Waffle House off I-95. And I got him into my car, and he laid it out, and he laid everything out. Gave me her name, told me why he was justifying it to me. She was ruining him financially. And during that meeting, he gave me a lot. Where she worked, her name, what she looked like, all this. And so I set up another meeting. And I just threw it out there. I just said, "Listen, man, the way I do these, I make it look like a robbery. a robbery gone bad, and she gets killed. I take all her shit, and she gets shot. And I told him, I figured I'd just throw it out there. I said, it'd be a lot cleaner if you can get me a gun. If you can get me the gun to do it, a throwaway. And at our next meeting, he brought a Taurus 38 caliber revolver and gave it to me.
Phew.
Yeah, and I gave him plenty of outs. We had, at this point, up to this point, it was still we had gotten the GBI involved, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, because usually up to this point, even it's still you're going to bring state charges on them. But once he gave me the gun, now things were kind of changing. And after a few phone meetings, in our in-person meetings, we found out that when he called me on his cell phone, when he gave me the final, do it, that call, even though he was in Georgia and I was in Georgia, that call bounced off the tower. The closest tower was in Jacksonville.
Wow.
He made that call, and then it came back to my phone in Georgia. And that gave us an interstate nexus.
Wow.
Which after the trial, they argued, and it actually went all the way to the Supreme Court, and that made case law. So that case made case law with the Supreme Court. And that established a cell phone as a communication device that affects interstate commerce, in the commission of a murder for hire. So it was a pretty significant case. And actually, that the gun and some of the other evidence from the case is one of the 5 featured cases in ATF headquarters when you walk in to our building up there.
Very cool. Very cool.
Lou, close that out to several years later when you're out with the family.
So one thing he mentioned to me every time we met, his wife had a daughter, but not his. He had already run through his wife's, but anyway, and she was 13 or 14 at the time, and he was adamant that he did not want the daughter killed. He just wanted the wife killed, and he said that to me on several occasions, and I guaranteed him it wouldn't. Well, after our second meeting, ATF decided we got to bring her in, the wife, because you never know, right? Did he have another guy, in case I didn't work out, right? And so, concerned for her safety, they had her brought in. And imagine they took her from work, brought her to, I think we had a hotel room rented out, and can you imagine getting the word that your spouse has hired someone to kill you? And her daughter, she brought her daughter. Her daughter was with her. So I met her and the daughter. Obviously, it was a very emotional meeting and all. And again, this little girl was 13 or 14. But to her credit, the wife was able to get herself together enough to place a recorded phone call to him that day, which helped, with our murder for hire, the whole case. And so years later, probably about maybe, 8 or 9 years later, I was at a restaurant out on Tybee Island, Georgia, a restaurant that's right out on the water with my wife and kids. And there's this young lady, 21 years old, waitress there, and she kept staring at me. I had no idea who she was, right? Just no idea. And finally, she came up to the table, and she goes, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, "I absolutely don't." And now the mind's going right. And she said, "You saved my mom's life."
Wow.
And that was the daughter. And she was a woman. She was grown at that time. And, she thanked me. She goes, "Thank you for saving my mother's life." And we're doing a documentary actually on that to go along with the next book. And I just met up. We were able to track her down with the wife, the intended victim. And we filmed. I spent a full day with her. We actually went on camera together, talked about it, filmed it. Very emotional. She cried, but it was pretty cool. That's just, again, we don't interact much with victims or intended victims, so it was kind of a cool thing to do, and nice closure on that case.
Hey, Lou, we're just about an hour here. I think I can talk to you all night. But one thing I want to throw out to you is there something that we should have asked you that you want to speak about, whether it's in the book or not?
The only thing I would say, and I think it's probably a good point, to kind of wrap up. But one thing that I usually touch on, and that I feel is very important, as a retired law enforcement officer, is, and this is not just for undercover people, but it's across the board. Um, it's a different job, and the stress level is very different. It's very different. Even if you have deadlines on your job and you have all this stuff, it's very different than not knowing if you're going to go home every day. And I've talked about this with like Navy SEALs, with Eddie Gallagher, with guys, and
Wow.
they say, listen, like they have the utmost respect for law enforcement. They're like, listen, you guys, we might do 6 or 7 deployments in our career. You guys are deployed every day. So I talk about this a lot in my book, especially at the end. I ran my personal life into the ground. By the time George was my supervisor, and then he left, I was getting showered with awards. OCDF Case of the Year, Department of Justice Project Safe Neighborhood Gun Investigation of the Year, Gang Investigation of the Year, U.S. Attorney's Office Law Enforcement Officer of the Year. But you know what awards I was never up for? Father of the Year, Husband of the Year, Friend of the Year.
Wow.
Because I had just thrown everything aside. My priorities, everything was skewed. I was obsessed. Oh, that's all I cared about. I was operating in the red, man. I was about 8,000 RPMs, and and that is certainly not exclusive just to undercover. It could be any kind of law enforcement. I don't care if you're, to me, the law enforcement I have the most respect for are the uniform guys who are answering calls, men and women
Right.
who are doing that every day. So no matter what it is, the message I like to put out is, man, keep your priorities right. Faith, family, friends. Those are the priorities, because the job. I'm not saying don't work hard. Work hard and do a great job, but keep your priorities. Go home and remember what's important. Because as both you guys know, the job goes on without you. No matter how important you think you are or you were, the job goes on without you. So keep your priorities.
George, I was going to ask you if you had anything else you wanted to ask, but I think that's a perfect conclusion, huh?
Yeah, it's um, some of life's most important lessons are not learned in pleasant ways. Um, and hopefully other folks can learn uh, from the mistakes that we've made. So they don't make the same ones. So yeah, brother, uh, it has been an absolute pleasure catching up with you and getting to spend time with you. I've told you this in person, and I'll say it now for the mass crowds out there. So proud of you for writing this book. So proud of you for completing it, because I know what a labor it was for you. Um, just proud of you. I love you. Uh, wish nothing but good things for you and your beautiful family going forward. And just keep the faith, brother. Keep the faith.
Hey, thank you, man. I love you, brother. And I'll tell you guys one more thing. My book has been optioned. There's a guy out there, big time out in Hollywood. His name is Rick Yorn, and he's got a company called LBI, and they're huge. And they see something in this book. They see a Netflix series with the different storefront operations being different seasons, and inserting. We kind of rotated our undercover crew, so you'd have different actors for different undercovers, different seasons, different bad guys, different good guys, supervisors, the whole deal. So, if I'm really hoping that happens, the success of the book, if you, whoever's out there, man, go on Amazon, Storefront Sting, and ATF Agent's Life Undercover. It's a quick, easy read, and I think it's a page turner. I've got nothing but good feedback. So support a brother, man. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you two guys. Thank you.
Hey
Uh,
Lou, thank you. You're a patriot. Really appreciate the work you have done and what you're doing now. Any other place that folks can follow you besides going to the Amazon and checking out your book? Is there a website that's attached to that?
There's a website that it's just about to go up. It's my name. It's louvaloze.com, LOUVALOZE.com. And you can get the book off there. And we actually got George has seen some undercover T-shirts. It says Undercover Life with the symbol that
Awesome.
we used for the. So it's really cool. Just check out that website. And man, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
and
You
you're
know,
on Instagram, right?
I am. I'm on Instagram and Facebook under my name. Yep.
Yep.
Lou, I can't thank you enough for coming on, and we look forward to speaking to you again on your next book.
Hey, listen, it hopefully soon, and I'd love to come back on, man. God
Yeah,
bless you guys. Thank you so much. Would love
absolutely. All right, gentlemen. George, thanks again. Lou, you guys
Ah,
be safe.
Thank you.